Hey everybody, welcome to another Purple Insider Extra. Matthew Coller here, along with Sam Ekstrom from TCO Performance Center. Another day of Vikings training camp. This day, though, was spent with the Denver Broncos on the practice field, and a player who was not out there is where we're going to start. Christian Darrisaw. In the past days, we've seen him at least out at practice. He's put some pads on. He's done a little bit of work, but no 11 on 11s. Today, Sam, though, Christian Darrisaw not present at all. We have not gotten any report from this, but Mike Zimmer said that he is not going to practice against the Broncos. Presumably will not be playing on Saturday in the preseason game. And I think, Sam, it's time to be concerned about Christian Darrisaw's health.
Yeah, let's review the order of events here. Sometime around, last week, Christian Darrisaw gets pads on. That's encouraging. Christian Darrisaw talks after practice, says that he feels great. He's on track. He might be in the scrimmage last Saturday. He wants to be ready for week one. It's all going according to plan. The next morning, Mike Zimmer with the now infamous one step forward, two steps back comment. And since then, Christian Darrisaw didn't do anything to progress into this getting more active, taking more snaps or anything. And now he's absent. So what happened between those two press briefings, we don't know, but considering this has been a nagging issue, recurring even as far back as last year, there's definitely reason to wonder if that groin or core injury is actually on the right track.
Right. It did seem like there was a track for him to come back and start competing with Rashad Hill for the job, and then all of a sudden now it doesn't seem like he is anywhere close to being back with this team, so that's something we'll continue to track. Now, Kellen Mond was back for the second day. Yesterday was a walkthrough, as we mentioned if you watched yesterday's video, but today Kellen Mond was actually taking a lot of 11 on 11 reps against the Denver Broncos. Mike Zimmer said that he felt Mond was a little bit rusty, but I thought we saw quite a few throws today from Kellen Mond that weren't too bad. We also saw him take quite a few sacks and look like he's a little bit behind, to be expected from Kellen Mond. Now, when we asked Mike Zimmer whether Mond would play on Saturday, Mike Zimmer kind of gave an unclear answer, so I'm not sure if we'll see him in the first preseason game. I would suspect, though, the way that he practiced today, that we will end up seeing Kellen Mond in the preseason game against the Broncos.
Interesting. Yeah, it was either no or I don't know, and there was kind of a mutter mixed in there. They used him a ton today, so it's not like they're afraid to get him reps. I felt like that walkthrough yesterday, he was sort of the focal point. They're like, let's get Kellen going through this as much as he possibly can. And they did say that they were working with him, on the mental reps a ton during his time away. So I guess maybe he's not completely behind, but Mike Zimmer did also confess that he was rusty. So he's got, and maybe tomorrow's practice combined with today's, maybe that's the determining factor on whether he plays or not. And if not, this Saturday, certainly the next Saturday would be his debut.
Now back to the injury front, we saw something very unfortunate, kind of only a few feet away from where we were watching. Blake Prohl, when they were doing some one-on-ones with receivers and cornerbacks, came out of a route, went down hard, was slamming the ground, was clearly in pain, and was carted off. And I don't want to jump to conclusions here because you never know, but that looked to me like that might be one of those types of season-ending injuries for Blake Prohl, who actually was performing pretty well in practice. I don't think that he was a guy who's trending toward making the roster, but Prohl was pushing to maybe be someone who makes the practice squad, and I think after this, it's going to be really tough for him to come back from what we saw in front of us.
Yeah, it looked very painful, not pretty. We were uncomfortably close to it. And for Prohl, this is crushing for him because it means he doesn't have a shot to, prove himself in the preseason. There is the angle too, though, where he gets to get paid by the team. He gets to stay on IR and sort of sit in meetings and learn and just be around the organization for a year. And assuming that he can come back from this, assuming it is a serious injury, could even be beneficial for him next year because he was the best UDFA receiver, I think, of the trio that they brought in, and making a push in recent days, showing a lot of BB-esque qualities. He's small in stature, but he's been, running good routes, catching a lot of balls. So a bummer for him. And think about that receiver room now, Coller. BC Johnson out, Blake Prohl out. I mean, that does bode well for guys like Dan Chisena, who I think are on the receiver bubble, who's looking to make this team for a second straight year kind of out of nowhere. And now I think there's an opportunity for someone, especially if they keep 6 receivers. If they keep 6, that 6th spot I think is pretty wide open.
And I wouldn't be shocked after what we've seen if Dan Chisena actually gets a chance to play in games this year for the Vikings. We saw again in one-on-ones him roast somebody down the sideline. He is one of the fastest players that I've ever seen up close. He's a former track runner for Penn State, and he's been making some noise as a wide receiver almost on a daily basis. Speaking of which, I know that everybody wants to know, how did they look against the Broncos? And I would say both offensively and defensively, Sam, it was a bit of a challenge. And where we saw the biggest challenge for the Vikings offense was along the offensive line. Kirk Cousins got a pass knocked down. We also saw Ezra Cleveland get beat off the line of scrimmage and get pushed right back into Kirk Cousins. There were a few screen passes that seemed like they were off in their timing that Kirk Cousins was not accurate on. We did see KJ Osborne once again stepping up and rising to the challenge and making a few nice catches today. He seems to be locked in right now to wide receiver 3 with D.D. Westbrook still standing on the sidelines in shorts, no pads on, so no progress there. But overall, at least on the offensive side, it looked like it was a pretty tough day for the Vikings.
Mike Zimmer and Vic Fangio are going to sit down, maybe have a Coors Light after this, and they're going to look at each other and say, man, that was a great practice. Our defenses look so good.
Yep.
Because they did. I mean, the offenses had the wind to reckon with, too. It was pretty windy out there. It felt like every completed pass was to a running back or a tight end. A lot of checkdowns. A lot of passes to the flats, not a lot downfield. I saw the Broncos connect one to Jerry Jeudy. Vikings didn't have much of anything downfield. Just a tough day for all the quarterbacks, I thought. I mean, Browning was flustered. Cousins was inaccurate. Honestly, Mond might have been the best by default because no one else really looked good. And how'd Teddy look? I thought Teddy looked okay. Hard to see, hard to evaluate for sure, but he's in a battle with Drew Lock right now.
Yeah, and I thought Drew Lock had a pretty tough practice as well, but he did hit a couple of passes, one to Noah Fant and another one, as you mentioned, to Jerry Jeudy. And something I wanted to bring up with you, Sam, is that the Broncos were doing quite a bit of taunting, including Jerry Jeudy rolling around in the end zone after he scored. And the NFL has talked about how they're going to lock it down on that taunting and celebrating if it's directly pointed at someone, I think is the issue. We saw a lot of that today. We saw a little bit of touchiness. No fights, but they're going to practice again tomorrow. I wonder your opinion, Sam, on the NFL doing more flag throwing over taunting, because we did see, I believe, today, now the refs don't make announcements during practice over the microphone, but I believe they did throw one penalty flag for taunting.
Yeah, they're getting those new rules enforced right away. Here's my take on it. They're going to come down hard weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4. People are going to get mad, and they're going to stop. That's how all of these iron-fisted rule changes have played out in recent years, and I think this is going to be exactly the same. It's just common sense, right? I mean, just let guys have reactions, let guys be emotional, don't let those types of things affect games. As long as the taunting isn't physical in nature or vulgar in nature, I don't have a problem with guys making football a little more interesting.
For me, it's one of those things where everybody knows where the line is. If you spin the ball, that's fine to me. I don't even mind a little finger wag, a little Dikembe Mutombo. If you start getting fights going because you're getting too much of people's faces, there's physical contact, you're delaying the game, obviously then penalty flags should be thrown. But if you catch a ball and you celebrate, who's got a big issue with that? I don't. I think it's hard to make plays in the NFL, and guys should be able to celebrate them. So the refs, have a little, feel for the game when it's a problem and when it's becoming a problem, when you need to tighten it up. I think they can do that, but I totally agree with you. Preseason, we're going to see a bunch of them. In the first week or two of the regular season, we'll see a bunch of them. And you hope that it doesn't cost somebody a game because the referees have been told, hey, you got to do the taunting thing. So the last thing I want to ask you, Sam, Mike Zimmer would not reveal how much his starters are going to play because that is a very important secret to keep. How much should they play, in your opinion, on Saturday?
How about 2 series? I don't think they need much. I guess I'd like to see them out there just to see if they can protect. That's what intrigues me. But I don't have a whole lot of other questions necessarily that, the team's going to learn, I think, far more about those guys in practice situations anyway. So don't risk injury. Like Danielle Hunter wasn't active today. You don't need to make Danielle Hunter active, but that offensive line, I mean, they need some work. So if for no other reason than that, give them a couple series.
I think that's fair. I think that anybody who's important should just not be playing at all in these preseason games. Last year, there were no preseason games. The Vikings offense did come out a little bit rusty against Green Bay, but Green Bay's offense came out and ripped up the Vikings. We saw a lot of scoring early on last year without people playing, in preseason games. And if you look at this Vikings roster with the injuries they already have, I mean, they're pretty thin in a lot of different areas. And I think that if you get one injury here or there, you're talking about maybe being very concerned. So if it's Harrison Smith, for example, Adam Thielen, for example, Danielle Hunter, as you mentioned, and even Kirk Cousins, I don't see a whole lot of use for it, but I think that Zimmer is going to go with what he's traditionally done and give guys a couple of reps, a couple of series. Maybe not Delvin Cook. Delvin Cook has mostly not done a lot in the preseason, but we'll see how they decide to play it. All right, we'll be back again tomorrow here from Vikings training camp on Purple Insider Extra. We'll catch you then.